Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today, I'm gonna show you the new reset of my gym, and I know you little grade chasers want to see the differences between the climbing grades, so my goal is to briefly show and explain all of these grades. And to make it more interesting, I'll try to give some advice on how I was able to send all of these boulders. Without further ado, enjoy the boulders! Okay, so to start off, we have this V1, and I'm gonna have a hard time commenting on this boulder since we go from jug to jug, but you know, the colors are nice, the moves are nice. Let's go into the next one. Alright, so V2 now. Compared to the V1, we start in this overhang and it doesn't go in a straight line. You can see that it starts from the left, goes on the right side, goes left again, and the jugs are a little sideways, so it's harder to grab them. And we are now into the V4 difficulty. So as we can see here, the holds are a bit smaller and they're harder to grab. So already there's a big difference in between the V2 we did. So right off the bat, you can see that we have specific footholds now. They're really small and it demands precision. And we can also see that there's lots of flagging into the wall to push yourself into the other direction. So there's already more techniques involved, better grip strength for the small holds, and just generally more physical moves. So we're already into the V5 range, and this V5 is really weird. Like, really weird. So I think from time to time these boulders can be nice. It's really tricky, so you have to use your brain cells. So right off the bat we can see that there's lots of different body positionings here, and it's quite tricky to get your balance, so you gotta use your hips more than usual. And I also got confused here since I had to take the volume up there, but instead I did this Ricci beta, so it was not the most optimal, but it worked for me. And we can also notice these small crimps, so it requires more strength than the previous grade. And there's even a heel hook to match the last hold, so more technical, more physical, and just trickier in general. Since there was no V6 in the new reset, I just went to the V7, so pretty huge step up from the V5 I just did. And this is where it gets spicy, because this boulder is actually pretty hard. I was trying to warm up, and this was more than a warm-up. Like, I actually used lots of finger strength. Also, this boulder is unfathomably long. As you see, it just never ends. And since there was a lot of holds into this boulder, it was actually pretty hard to find a good feet, because you had to get some good opposition to go to the next crimps. And I felt like I didn't do the most optimal foot sequence, but I could still flash this boulder, and it was actually pretty hard. I think this could have been V8, but maybe with some more optimal beta, this is not that bad. But compared to that white V5 we see on the right side, this is a huge step up. After looking at this boulder for a couple of minutes, I asked myself, how many holds can I skip? With this beta, I could skip 10 holds of this climb, and it's probably my record of holds that I didn't use. And it felt easier, so I don't know. My body is so long that sometimes I feel more comfortable in other positions that the route setters intended. After the V7, we're hopping on this green V9 since they didn't set a V8. So this boulder is actually really cool. It starts with like a jug, but then it has a crimp, some undercling that is blocked, some pretty good holds, but then it goes into some horrible pinches. So I just think it's cool that this boulder has multiple sets of holds. Alright, so again, pretty huge step up from the V7, but since that V7 was hard, I was pretty much warmed up. So this boulder starts in a huge overhang, maybe around 60 or 70 degrees, and it has some campus move at the start, and really powerful moves into these pinches that, if you don't know them, they're actually pretty bad. They don't have much friction into them, and they're very wide, so it's kind of hard to pinch them. But I was getting pretty far into my first attempt, and I thought I was gonna flash this one, but these last pinches were horrible. Honestly, I was really struggling, and the position to launch into the last move was hard, and when I was going into the last hold, my foot popped, and that was so tragic because the flash was really close. On my second attempt, I got this far again, and I couldn't figure out what to do to go to the last hold. And before hopping on my third attempt, I asked the route setters what I was doing wrong and how they did the last movement, and they told me that the only thing that they did differently than me was flagging really high into the right side, into the wall, instead of having my foot just doing nothing in the void. So by flagging, I could get this balance and go very statically into the last hold, and that made the whole difference. It's so weird how sometimes you just don't see something, but then somebody tells you a beta or you see the beta and boof, it's just easy. We are now in the V10 and this boulder is full of good holds, but there's lots of toe hooks involved and some tricky moves that makes this boulder low percentage. Like I said, every hold is good, it's just that they're positioned in a weird manner that you have to use toe hooks, heel hooks, or commit to 100% to go to the next hold, and for that reason I think this boulder is a comp boulder, so every move is committing and I think it's pretty hard to flash this one. So that being said, I wanted to flash this one. I'm try-harding the brush here, and yeah, I'm gonna give it all on my first attempt. So before hopping on it, I asked around some beta, and yeah, it turns out that it's pretty straightforward, just gotta commit in every single move. And right here, I placed the heel hook instead of a toe hook, but it worked for me since my body is pretty long. And for this move, I just did a huge beta break. I was not going to cut loose on that on my first attempt, so I decided to do the splits, and it actually worked to get my foot up there. And this move turned out to be the crux going into this small crimp, and I was surprised to get it on my first attempt. And at this point, I just couldn't let go, right? I just had to push. Thank God the last hold was good because I was running out of energy. So super happy with this flash. I think I'm the only one who flashed it in the gym. So yippee! Alright, we are into the last boulder of this reset, this green V11. And I know what you guys are gonna say. This boulder looks like it has huge jugs, some very big holds, and it doesn't look too bad on camera. But this boulder is actually really hard, and at that time I was considering asking the route setters to upgrade this V12 because there was one move that was really hard, but since the beginning and the last section of this boulder was pretty easy, it was hard to give a grade on this one. So on my first attempt, I actually did a pretty good try. I ended up flashing this whole first section, and this is the move that I was talking about. When you launch into that second scoop, I know it looks alright, but the angle changes drastically. You go from 55 degrees to probably 20 degrees, and the cut loose is enormous, so it's really hard to hold these two bad holds while having this really big swing. So instead of draining all of my energy into that one move, I decided to try the ending because I wanted to see if this boulder was doable that day, excluding the crux of this boulder. And on my first attempt for this last section, I put this left heel hook, and I knew straight away that it was not the beta. So I decided to try the ending again, and this beta was much better because that way I can go really slowly into that capped crimp. It's a very delicate move, so by having that feet there, I could just lock off on my right arm. Even though that pinch isn't great, it was enough to go statically into the crimp. And to finish up the boulder, I placed the toe hook to get the match, and it was done. However, this boulder is not done. I had not figured out the crux yet. So fun fact, if I'm not mistaken, it was one of the first times the girls route setters tried to set a V11 by themselves, and they did try every single move separately, and they thought this could be holdable for V11, but as it turns out, it was maybe just a bit higher, so that's why I think with the original beta, this could be around V12. Of course, they did an amazing job setting this boulder, it's really cool. It's just that for every route setter, it's always hard to know a hard grade when you combine every single move together. And you know, I might just be bullshitting and I'm not strong enough to hold this position, so I might just be the problem, who knows. And after all these attempts, I was like, F this shit, I'll just reach this move and then place a heel hook, and surprisingly this actually worked, and I was super close to staking this my first attempt, but then my heel slipped. And keep in mind that this was like 4 hours into my session, so I was getting super tired, but I wanted to get this boulder since at this point I found out that I could do it this way. So I was not gonna give up that easily, and I tried it again and again. I think it took me 4 attempts to understand how to do the move. So right here I'm trying it from the ground, and when I go into this reachy beta, I leave some space for my heel hook. And it's a lot trickier than it looks. I know it's a beta break, but it's really hard to keep the heel hook and then bring back the right hand into this other sloper. So it was actually a V11 beta break. And yeah, the rest of the boulder I figured it out like 2 hours ago, so yeah, it was no problem. I was getting a little pumped to get the match, but it was controlled, so I could finally send this boulder and go sleep for the rest of the day.